Hi everyone, welcome to my session. It's lovely to see you here. I know it's the last day, probably you're super tired, and I promise this is the last time I'm making an appearance at BITS this year. Just so I know my audience, has anyone from you here been on my session yesterday? I had a Power BI meets UX design, but okay, not a lot of people. Good. Um, And before I start, I want to ask you, like, how many of you are working with Power BI? Okay, that's great to see. Uh, has anyone of you heard about UX design before? Okay, that's not bad. And is there anyone here who thinks that they're just bad at design and design is not your thing and you can create reports, but okay, you're at the right session. I hope I'm gonna convince you today with just a simple tips and tricks and principles that you can follow, that you can create even better reports. So the session today is called Power BI meets UX Design, Creating Accessible, Intuitive, and Visually Appealing Reports. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Elena Drakulevska. I come from North Macedonia, but for the last 3 years I've been living and working in Vienna. I'm working as a BI consultant at a data consultancy company called Bitelligent, and I have two great passions, Power BI and UX design. And I consider myself super lucky to be able to be working with this, with both of them. And my passion grew so big that I started speaking at conferences about it, and I started my own blog earlier this year in January. It's called Moon Story, and you can find it at moonstory.design. Here you can find my LinkedIn profile and my website and my Twitter and LinkedIn handle. Feel free to connect, but also I'm gonna share these details in the end, so no worries. Okay, today we have a lot to cover, so I hope we'll manage to squeeze in everything. So I'll start by giving you an introduction into UX design, what it is, why we need it. Then we're going to talk about visual perception, how we are perceiving the world and how we are making sense of the information in the world. And once we go over that, we'll talk about how you can add color to your report, so you can guide the user's attention and make an impact. And then we'll talk about designing for accessibility. Then we'll put it all together and we'll go over the key takeaways, and I'm just gonna give you some additional resources, and hopefully we'll have some time for questions. Feel free to ask if it's like something short, if it's like a discussion, please leave it for the end. And yeah, I'm happy you're here. So without further ado, let's dive right in. So you might be wondering, what on earth is UX design? I mean, I saw some of you already raised your hands and you already know what UX design is. That really makes me happy. That doesn't mean that I'm gonna stop talking about it. And let's see why you should care. And to answer this question, and what is UX design, I want to ask you first this. Has it ever happened to you to pull a door that says push? Okay, and better question would be probably, how many times has this happened to you? I see people are smiling. So if this has happened to you, I just want you to know that this is not your fault. This is a classic example of bad design, and is what we call a Norman door, and is named after the design guru Don Norman. So he's considered kind of the father of UX design. He's made a really big impact in this field. And it all started with a simple question. How can something as simple as a door be so confusing? There is not so much we can do to a door, right? You can either open it or close it. And yet we all struggle opening doors. So Norman doors are a great example of why design matters and why we need to care about UX design in particular. So just imagine if we struggle with something as simple as as opening a door. Imagine the impact of a bad report. So what is exactly UX design? Is it a bunch of pretty pictures? I hope you all know the answer to this by now. So UX design is not about aesthetics. It's about function. it's about putting the user in the center. So it's how a person, the user, feels about interacting with or experiencing a product, or in our case, a Power BI report. And it's funny because, you know, when I started my job in this company and kind of word came around that I'm working and my focus is UX design, and people started coming to me and they're like, hey, you are our UX design expert, right? And I'm like, yeah, oh my God, you know what it is. And they're like, you know, I'm looking for a fancy report. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna try to help you. And then people started coming, and they're looking constantly for this fancy report or nice looking report, and I'm like, you know, that's not what UX design is. So when people think about design, they think about the tip of the iceberg, right? So and this part is actually what you see. This is the end product, but it's kind of the only the UI part of it. And it's also what we call the wow effect or the fancy report, right? So every client wants a fancy report. Everyone is saying, oh, I want a report that looks wow. But actually, UX design lies beneath the surface. It's what you don't see. And I highly recommend you to check my session that was yesterday. So we really dived into what a lot of parts of UX design process, like doing UX research, prototyping, wireframing, testing. But today, of course, we're going to talk about some other things like accessibility and how you can use color and how you can make your design intuitive for the users. So the first key takeaway from today that I want you to know is that form follows function. So it suggests that a product's design should be primarily driven by its function, not by how it looks, not by its visual appearance. So for example, if you take a design of a smartphone, right, it should prioritize usability, ease of use, accessibility, and all other things are coming afterwards. So the function of a phone is to enable you to make phone calls, right, but also to endure when it falls down. So if you think about Nokia 3310, right, so it's like, it stayed there forever because it was usable, it was endurable, and it was fun. But also on the other side, if you think about Apple products, so you have a phone. I'm gonna try to take it out. Let's see. So it's still usable, it's user-friendly, it's accessible, right? But it also looks good. It kind of makes you feel good. So this is also the other part of design. It's aesthetics, but it only comes after the function. So we would have never used the iPhone if it didn't fulfill the function that it's supposed to fulfill, right? Okay. So now that we covered why we need UX design, let's see how we perceive things, how our brain makes sense of the world around us. So we have these mental models, and these mental models are assumptions that we have of the world. But kind of everyone that comes from a different background has different assumptions and has different worldview. And by understanding their mental models, we can create reports that are more intuitive and easier to use. And it also helps us identify potential pain points that users might be having. So in order, without giving you a definition of visual perception and how we perceive things, I want you to look at the following slide first. I'll give you a moment. I don't know if you read it in the correct order. Can you please raise your hand if you read it like that? Okay, awesome, that's perfect. And I don't know if you, so this is something that's called visual hierarchy, and unfortunately we're not going to dive into this today in a lot of details, but you know, you can see how it's attention grabbing, but it's also following, the eyes are following, are moving around the page, right? And if you think about, I don't know if you saw probably in the back over there, you didn't see, but over here, there's also text. Probably no one mentioned, right? It kind of looks like a boilerplate, but it's not, and it actually says, and you probably did not read this at all because it looks like boilerplate. So, the first thing about perceiving things and slides and reports is how we read, right? So if we scan a page or a report, our eyes are kind of moving in a Z line direction. So it starts from top left corner and it moves right and then left bottom and to the right. And how we use this in reports is we are placing information, like the most important information that we are supposed to place is, oops, is this working? It doesn't get to the one? Okay. So the most important information should be placed on the top left corner, and as we go down, it should be like the least important information. Because we want to make sure that the most important things are placed on the top. And this is also one of the reasons why companies want to have their logo placed in the top left corner, or why KPI cards are coming at the top, and so on. And this is a very nice rule of thumb, right? So we should place important information top left corner, least important information bottom right. Are you agree? Do you agree? Okay. So what if I showed you this now? So this might seem counterintuitive to those of us who are speaking languages like English, which are read left to right. But there are actually 2 billion people in the world that speak a language that's read right to left. So when we are designing for these people, we need to make sure that we are placing the most important information in the top right corner and the least important information in the bottom left corner. Now, I think this was a website about design. Please don't check that. I hope it's still true and I remember it correctly. But anyway, so rules of thumb are really nice, right? So they guide us, they help us, but they also create bias. And UX design is all about noticing this bias and getting rid of it, avoiding it. So the second key takeaway for today would be always think about a user, even when you're following a rule of thumb. Always question your assumptions and try to avoid any bias that you might have. And now that we talked about how we kind of, how our eyes scan the page, there's something else that kind of helps us create designs that are intuitive. And that's something that's called Gestalt principles. Has anyone heard about Gestalt? Okay, that makes me also happy. So, without giving you a definition of the Gestalt principles, I want to show you the next image. So, what do you see here? Can anyone answer? Triangle, perfect. Do you see anything else? Pac-Man? Yeah. 3 white Pac-Mans, right? And probably we can all agree that there is no triangle here. I'm kidding, but yeah, basically there is no triangle here. So our brains are filling up this missing information, and we can see it as a complete form, even though it's like just 3 white Pac-Mans arranged around the white space or the black space in a way that our brains perceive a triangle. And this is a Gestalt principle called closure, and unfortunately we're not going to talk about this today, but we're going to talk about 3 kind of easiest and Gestalt principles that you can introduce into your reports. This was just so you know how our brains are working. And the Gestalt principles are actually something that was coined in the 1920s by a group of German psychologists. And the word Gestalt, I don't know if I have any German speakers in the audience. We have? Do you know, could you tell us what it means? No, I mean just the word. The way things are presented. The way things are presented, yeah, okay, but I was looking for what Gestalt, the word, means, and it means shape. But in psychology, it means the way things are presented. And these Gestalt principles were part of this broader movement in the 1920s, and the core idea of it was to find out how our brains are working and how we are making sense of the world. So basically, in psychology, it means that the sum is other than the sum of its parts. But keep in mind, it's not saying that is more than the sum of its parts, because the sum, we have 3 white Pac-Mans, right? And we don't have, the whole is not 3 white Pac-Mans and, but a whole is a triangle. So that is something other, something completely different than what we were thinking. Did I not switch? Okay. So today we're going to talk about 3 Gestalt principles called similarity, proximity, and common region. And the first principle of similarity states that when things appear to be similar, we tend to group them together. What does this mean? Like, we also think that when things look together, they also have a similar function. Like, this is a Gestalt principle that helps you kind of, when you see a button, you know that you can click it, right? Because it's kind of similar to many other buttons that you have seen before. And it gives you an idea that that's the function that it's supposed to do. It's clickable, right? And for understanding why is this important in report design, I want to make a small experiment with you, if that's okay for you to participate. So I'm going to show you a bunch of numbers, and I'll give you 20 seconds, and I want you to count all the 9s that you can see on screen. Are you ready? Okay, go. I'm thinking if 20 seconds was too long for this. Did you count? How many? 10? 9? 8? Sorry? 8? Okay, so we cannot agree how many 9s were there, right? Sorry? I'm not sure I understood. How many 9s? Oh my god, okay. No worries. So let's continue. Let's try another experiment. And now I'm going to make it even more interesting. I'm going to give you 10 seconds, and I'm going to ask you to count all the 8s. Oops. Now. Yeah, I hope you can see it from the from the back. How many 8s? 10? Anyone else saw something else? Okay, we can all agree it was 10, right? I gave you half the time than I gave you before, and yet you all saw and counted the same thing that I wanted you to see, right? So the principle of similarity states that when things appear to be similar, we group them together. But this principle is also used to create contrast, because when similarity occurs, an object can get emphasized just by being different than the rest. So you could easily spot it over there, right? And this is something that we also want to use in our reports. So if you just create reports that, we put the information there and we hope for the best and we hope the user is going to find the information that we placed it, this clearly states that not everyone will see the same thing. And not everyone will concentrate on the same thing, but we want to make this information pop. We don't want, we want the user to see 10 8s, and we need to make sure the user sees it. So in design, this is actually called pre-attentive attributes. And it took me a while, really, to remember these pre-attentive attributes, and I couldn't really put it in my mind, and I couldn't remember it. And I was like, when I struggle with this so much, and I really did explore design, I really learned about Gestalt, I was learning about these things, and I still struggled, then how can you make someone who is coming from a technical background as well to remember this, right, and use it? So that's why I came up with my own principle. And I call it the pink elephant principle. So in design, we should incorporate unforgettable, attention-grabbing elements that stand out prominently like a pink elephant in a room. So we can capture the attention in a way that is hard to forget or ignore. Now, even if I told you, don't think about the pink elephant, you're still gonna think about the pink elephant, right? So this is actually what you want to achieve with your reports. So you want to place the information there and make sure that the user sees it and remembers it. Now I'm going to show you some examples in Power BI, which is kind of similar to what we did with the numbers, but yeah, just so you know how you can use it. So the principle of similarity, right? So here on the top, we can see 4 KPI cards. And I can say that because, yeah, we kind of have an idea how a KPI card looks, right? And they're all similar, they're all placed next to each other. And our brains know that, okay, this is important, these are the KPIs, right? But at the same time, I don't know which one of these metrics is more important than the rest. Is their importance the same or not? So, and over here in the bottom left, like sales amount per month, it's kind of hard to make sense which month we had the most sales and which month we had the worst sales, right? I can probably see, yeah, I don't know, August we kind of did good, January probably it's the worst month, but I'm not sure, right? Like the information is there, but when I see it, I need some time to, yeah, I need to some time to process it and find this information. But look what happens when I do this, right? So we are creating this contrast and we are putting the profit margin in a different color, saying, I don't know, in this case, it's below our goals, the profit margin is not big enough. Or sales per month, we can clearly see, okay, it's August is the best month and January is the worst performing month. And you can do this with DAX. I don't dare write DAX on stage. I mean, I did live in Italy, but I still don't write DAX like an Italian. But basically, this is what you want to achieve. So you don't want the user to miss this information. So this was the principle of similarity. And the principle of proximity is the next one. So can anyone tell me how many groups of circles can they see here? 1. Yeah, it's one group of circles. But what if we did this? Two groups, right? So it's the same circles as before, we just have a bit more space between in the middle, and it looks like we have 2 groups of circles, although they look exactly the same as before. So the principle of proximity states that when things that are close together appear to be more related than things that are spaced further apart. But how can we use this in report design? Well, we can reverse engineer it, right? So we can place information that is connected closer to each other, and information or unrelated items should be spaced a bit further apart. And the next principle, and then I'm going to show you how this looks like in Power BI, is the principle of common region. Now we start with the same group of circles as we did before with the proximity. It's one group of circles, right? But if I just added a shape somewhere, it doesn't matter where, it feels like this middle group of circles is separated than the rest. It also kind of creates now 3 groups, right? Because we have these circles on the left and circles on the right, and these in the middle. So this principle of common region states that when objects are located within the same closed region, so it can be a shape, it can be a line, it can just be a different color, background, and so on, we perceive them as being grouped together. And this principle is so powerful that it overpowers proximity. So we have here the 2 groups from proximity, but now the middle group is in a shape. So it means that this group is still separated than the rest. And to go back to the same report that we have, so the principle of proximity, it's kind of with the KPIs, right? So we have this information, similar information placed closer together. And what about common region? So common region can be found around each visual, basically. So every this shape or background is the common region. And you can use the common region for navigation elements, for filter panes and so on. And it doesn't really have to be like super bold or anything. The separation can just be a line, and it's enough to make this distinction between the navigation and the rest of the page. Now, one thing to keep in mind when we're talking about common region, it can really easily get overcrowded. So overuse creates clutter. And I cannot stress this enough. So when possible, please try to make sure you're using white space, like the principle of proximity, to make this separation between the elements, because our minds will still kind of see that it's apart, but don't overuse it. And I'm going to show you how it would look like. So here, for example, on the left, I hope that you can see the contrast over here. So we have a filter pane with a couple of slicers, and we have common region around each and every slicer. And it kind of looks too much, right? It probably is not even important to have these lines over here. And if we just remove these lines and this background information, and just by using proximity between the slicers, we can still clearly see that, okay, we have the ID, manufacturer, type, and so on. So but still the space between two different elements is bigger than the space within the element itself. So please pay attention to how you're using the white space, because you don't want to place the next title closer to the previous item than the item that is a part of. So that brings us to the third key takeaway for today, which is, may the Gestalt be with you. So if you're applying the Gestalt principles to your designs, you can help the users find the information that they're looking for. So we can make the designs intuitive and understandable. And I do have another session that's called the Jedi Mind Trick of Power BI Design, and over there I'm talking about the rest of the Gestalt principles. So if you're interested, follow me around. Probably I'm gonna give it sometime soon in the future, or at some user group. Okay, any questions? Okay, everything's clear, I hope so. So now that we know how we can make intuitive designs and where to place this information, we need to make sure that color is also used in a way that draws the user's attention and conveys meaning. Because if you overuse color as well, we are just overwhelming the user with information, and it's very hard to concentrate on the important things. So color is more than just a pretty palette, right? It's a powerful tool that can evoke emotions, that can communicate brand identity, and can emphasize important information. And we need to make sure that we are using color thoughtfully and intentionally. And I have one rule about color that I really like, which is called the color rule. And it's the 60-30-10 rule. So 60 means using 60% of a neutral color that's kind of used for the background, and some background information, or some shapes and so on. Then you have 30% of a complementary color. You can use this secondary color, for example, for headings and subheadings and so on. And 10% of an accent color, which is just to emphasize important things. And now you probably say, okay, I'm 60-30-10, but how do I choose the right colors? This does not help me at all, right? Well, don't worry. There's something that's called color harmony. And you don't need to know any theory about this, but there are so many tools out there that are free that you can use. And you can find colors that, according to these harmonies, are kind of go well together. So it's very pleasing for the eye. And there's this color wheel from Adobe, which is kind of a personal assistant in selecting colors for your report. And I'm going to show you right away the tool. But one more thing that I want you to keep in mind is that colors also have meaning. And they convey meaning, but the thing is that they have different meaning in different cultures as well. So, for example, in Western cultures, red is often associated with danger or passion, whereas in some Asian cultures is represented as good luck. So you kind of want to keep this information about the users, where their background, their cultural context, where they're coming from. So you can know which color to use, because, for example, if you want sometimes colors that have positive associations, right? So you want to make sure that it's in accordance to that. So I'm going to show you, how are we on the time? Okay, it's good. Nope. Okay, so if you go to color.adobe.com, hope you can all see. So here on the left, we have color harmony. And over here, we can choose different types of harmonies. So we have monochromatic, we can see that it's just one palette, or we have complementary contrast, or square, and so on. So it's different types of color harmony in the background. But let's use the split complementary, for example. And over here, this is the main color. You can see it by this white arrow over here. Whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. And down here, once you choose your colors, for example, you can go down here and you can copy the hex codes for your colors. And for example, if you're using a certain brand color, you can even put that one over here. You can change the color and just insert the hex code of your color that you need, and you can create a bunch more colors that go well with that one. And this often happens, like I often get this question from people. They're like, okay, what do I do when my client really wants me to use their brand colors? And it's, I don't know, most of the time it's like some really red, or some very green, I don't know. And if you put this color all around the report, then it doesn't really make sense, right? So it's not really pleasant to look at. But you can always create these complementary colors that go well with that color, and you can still use their brand color just for emphasis and so on, just don't overdo it, right? 10% of an emphasis color. So here, this is the color wheel tool, right? Then you can also extract themes. Like if you have an image, you can place it over here, and it will extract the colors for it. You can also explore some trendy palettes and some trends. And yeah, it's a really nice tool. And there is this other tool that's called colors.co. And I'm gonna go to the first page. So we have a generator of colors, and then we can explore trending palettes. So if we go over here, we can already see some predefined palettes. Please make sure that some of them include more colors. So the rule is try to keep it 3 to 5 colors, not more than 5 around the report. It's okay if it's monochrome, but yeah, don't overdo it. Okay. So that brings us to the next key takeaway for today, which is use color only when it's necessary. So keep your designs simple, right? Less is more. And by using color thoughtfully and intentionally, we can create reports that really create an impact, but also communicate this information effectively. And at the same time, that look visually appealing to your audience. So now that we know where to place this information, how we can use color, the next point is accessibility. So colors can also play a big role when it comes to accessibility, and they can help us create our designs more accessible to our users. And accessibility is crucial for ensuring that our reports can be used and understood by everyone. Now, before I continue, there's one amazing session that's coming in 1.5 hours that is just around accessibility, right? Is it at 4? At 4, okay. Do you know the gate? At gate 2. Okay, Valerie is going to give you a session only around accessibility. I highly recommend that you follow that one. But yeah, I mean, we're still gonna cover some things with accessibility, but we realize that we have similar topics, so But it's kind of nice that hers comes after mine. So I'm going to give you just why we need accessibility and some tips and tricks, and then she'll continue and give you a bigger session around that. So to understand why accessibility matters, I want you to look at the next photo. So here we can see on the left how green, picture of green and red apples, and on the right we can see how people with some visual impairment can perceive the same picture. And yeah, you know, we always use green and red when we want to say, yeah, green is good, red is bad, and this is one of the things that really, I cannot wrap my hand around it. And it's clearly not accessible for everyone, right? Is anyone here in the audience has any visual impairments? Okay, it's fine. Just so you know how colors, how the importance of colors, I also want you to look at the next image. So this went viral, I think, 10 years ago. I don't know. It was a long time ago. It's a photo of a dress that's white and gold, or black and blue. Does anyone see it as white and gold? Okay, I see it as white and gold as well. Do you see it as a black and blue? Yeah. Okay, that's amazing, right? So you do not have any visual impairment, right? And yet the same photo, you perceive different colors. I mean, different people perceive different colors, right? So this is why colors are important, but it's also why we need to make our reports more accessible to everyone. So it's not about people who have some form of disability, although there's 1 in 6 people in the world that lives with some form of it. So this is actually more than 1 billion people in the world that live with some form of disability. Like, to me, this number was really shocking. And out of these numbers, 300 million people actually have some color vision deficiency. And that comes around 3 and something % of the population. But what's more shocking, actually, is that for the female population is around 1%, and for the male population is around 8%. So if you keep in mind how many people in tech are actually from the male population, let's say, we really need, I mean, not only about that, of course, but it's like 8% is really a big number. It's a really big percentage. And out of these numbers, actually, this number is expected to rise in future. So by 2050, it's expected to even double. So this means that we really need to raise this awareness and create reports that are accessible and can be used by everyone, right? So even if it's just one person that cannot use the report, but you can make it usable for this person, then we should do that. So color is one of the things, one of the most obvious things when it comes to accessibility, right? So we should make sure that we use color contrast from the text with the background that's at least 4.5. So this is according to Web Content Accessibility Standards. And I'm going to show you right away how it is, how we can use this Adobe Color tool to check our contrast. But it's not only about color. So accessibility is a lot more, right? So we have visually impaired people, or we have people who are using screen readers. And do you know that Power BI is compatible with that? I'm going to show you also, right? I mean, we'll switch to that demo in a minute. But it's also about, so if we cannot really rely on color, for example, we need to make sure that we still convey this information in any other way. So for example, if it's a line chart, we want to make sure that we're not using only colors to make this distinction, but we can use one line that is a solid line and one that is dotted. Or if we have navigation, so you want to use icons that are universally known. So, and in addition to that, try to add text, for example, so you don't rely on the how people were going to perceive this icon, and are different cultures are going to understand it. But if you're not sure, and I mean, not only if you're not sure, but try to add this text next to the icon, or as a tooltip and so on. So let's jump to the demo. So I'm going to start with showing you Adobe Color. So in the Adobe Color and then Accessibility Tools, which is the 4th tab over here, we can see below there is a contrast checker, and we have text color and background color. And over here on the right, we can see contrast ratio 3.04 to 1. And we have this icon over here, and if we scroll down, we can see that there is a pass with the contrast for icons and graphics, and also for big text. But if it's like a small text, then we no longer have this pass, we have a fail, right? So this standard is saying that we need contrast ratio that's at least 4.5. So for example, if you put your hex colors, you can actually make one of them darker. Oops, I overdid it. Well, something. It's not, okay, it's working. So we can scroll, and now we have, okay, it's 5.23, but still we have a pass for all of them. So this is the least things that you can do. So this is not even about visually impaired people, but you can make it easier for everyone to read and to understand the information and text that you're putting over there. And if you go to Power BI, so the first thing that I want you to know is that there are themes that are accessible built in Power BI. So over here we can see accessible themes, right? And we can choose one of them if we don't want to pick our own colors. But if we want to get creative, we can always go to Adobe Color, and then under Contrast Checker we can see this colorblind safe. Can you see from the back? Should I zoom? It's okay. And here we can actually see that there are no conflicts found. Like this is the complementary contrast that we had before, and we can see that all these colors are good to go. And if we scroll down, we can actually see how people with different types of visual impairment can perceive these colors. Now I can see that maybe the contrast is not the best, but still it's kind of clear that the colors are not the same, right? But then they're easily recognizable. There is no conflict. There are no two colors that look the same for one person. And if we move this around, I'll show you. Hopefully we'll find some okay. It's not collaborating. Okay, so here we can see that there is possible conflicts found between two colors, right? So if we have something like this, we kind of want to avoid it, because those two colors wouldn't be able to be told apart by someone maybe. And we can see which are these colors, and we can change them. And if we go back to Power BI, we can see here these two line charts. So it's we have blue and green lines, and it's kind of similar. I mean, the colors are similar. So if we change the colors, we can see, oops. So we can see one of them is solid and one of them is dotted. And it's not only that the colors are different, but it's also this extra information. So the lines are different, right? So it's clear. So we're not relying only on color, and you actually want to add this as well. You can also add markers and so on. And some other thing that's really important here is using a screen reader, or we need to make sure that when we go to the selection, we have layer order and tab order. And this tab order is important. This means that when we click tab on a keyboard, this is how we are going to select the visuals. And to be honest, this is not something that you are making accessible for people who are not who have a visual impairment, but this can also mean that is used by someone who is just a fan of a keyboard, right? For example, to be honest, I'm not using my keyboard around a lot. I prefer to use the mouse, but my partner always likes to use the tab and the keyboard. So he's all with shortcuts and so on. So the thing is, it's not only about people who have some impairments, it's also about different types of users, right? Different types of preferences. So that is also accessibility. And we want to be inclusive. So you need to make sure that this tab order is presented in the same way. So as we talked, from top left corner to bottom right corner, you want to make sure that you have this order right. And there is one more thing that I wanted to show you, which is, let me find it, the alt text. So if we have some people that are using screen readers, you want to make this accessible. So there is this alt text where you can enter a description that will be read by a screen reader when they're going around the report. So you don't rely on the visual information only. So in theory, you should always have some alt text that's added. Okay, let's go back. And that brings us to our fifth key takeaway for today, which is find other ways of conveying information. Don't rely on color. Don't rely only on icons. Like, try to make sure to add this information and make it more accessible for everyone. Because after all, accessibility is not just a buzzword, but it's a necessity. And that kind of brings us to the end of the session, and I'm going to go to the key takeaways for today one more time. Oops, not really. I actually wanted to skip, but anyway, okay, I didn't manage to skip. Let me try this. So that brings us to the key takeaways for today. And the first one is form follows function. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't care about the aesthetics, right? Always think about the user, even when you're following a rule of thumb. May the Gestalt be with you. So use the Gestalt principles to make your designs more intuitive. Use color only when it's necessary, so you can draw the user's attention and convey information. So less is more, and use the 60-30-10 rule. Find other ways of conveying information. Don't rely on color, don't rely on icons. Make it accessible for everyone. And I'm going to give you just one more thing that's kind of extra, which is always design with the user in mind. If there's just one thing that you remember from today, let it be this one. Always think about the user and design with the user in mind. And here are some additional resources that you can have. So I have here the Design of Everyday Things, which is a book by Don Norman that we mentioned in the beginning, the father of UX design. I also put the Google UX design course that I took 2 years ago. I can highly recommend it, and there are a bunch of scholarships available for that one. Adobe Color and Colors are the two tools that I showed you. Feel free to explore and play around with it. And the web accessibility guidelines, if you want to check that one out. And before I finish, I just want to say that good design is a lot harder to notice than poor design, because good design fits our needs so well that the design is invisible. And this is also by Don Norman, the father of UX design. And with that, I just want to thank you all for coming here today. These are, again, my contact details. Feel free to reach out and connect with me. I'm always happy to hear from you. And please leave me some feedback. I would really appreciate it. And thanks once again for being here. And yeah, if you have any questions, I'm all yours. No questions? Any questions? Yeah? Oh, that's a really good question. So the question is, how do you, so in the accessibility line chart, if you have two lines that are overlapping, how do we make this distinction? Well, usually what I like to do, and I know that, yeah, you know, you need to keep the scale and everything, but for some, in some certain occasions, it's okay to change the scale, so you can zoom in, so you can make this difference a bit more clear. That's like on top of my mind. But yeah, it's kind of, we're out of time, but